Anneke van Rossum is the Advocacy and Advancement Coordinator at Delaware Riverkeeper Network. She's been in her staff role for just over 3 years, but has a storied history with the organization going back to childhood. Anneke graduated from Ithaca College before moving on to Vermont Law School, where she graduated with her JD in 2022. Her role centers around education, community organizing, and overall uplifting of the powerful work Delaware Riverkeeper Network does. Today, she joins us for a special Earth Day episode of The Signal. Hi, Anneke. Welcome to The Signal and happy Earth Day.
Hi, Cyril. Happy Earth Day. I'm happy to be here.
Can you start off by telling us about the first Earth Day that you remember celebrating?
Oh my gosh. I think it's hard because it feels like my whole childhood, every day was Earth Day. So I don't actually know if I could categorize it, but I could tell you, like every day of my life, especially as like a young kid, was playing out in the garden. I was very fortunate to always have like a couple pets that I could enjoy. I would listen to story CDs. I have this one baby video where I'm listening to a recycling song. So I couldn't pinpoint an Earth Day, but I do think every day was Earth Day, and I think every day should still be Earth Day.
And that, in large part, is because your mom, Maya, is a huge environmental activist, I would say, an advocate, the founder of the National Green Amendments for the Generations Movement and Organization, as well as the, over 30-year leader of the Delaware Riverkeeper Network.
Yeah, at this point, she's been the Delaware Riverkeeper and leading the Delaware Riverkeeper Network for over 30 years. It might be close to 35 now, which makes her actually the world's longest acting and active riverkeeper. So I am definitely very fortunate that that is my role model.
And when did you first kind of like formally start being an advocate and or organizer or activist for environmental issues?
So actually the first time I remember kind of doing something on my own, like you said, my mom is my mom. So naturally I got brought to a lot of things. There's a historic video of, or photo where I'm like in a creek holding hands with everybody to protest the Dark Hollow Dam. But the first time I kind of did something just on my own was I actually learned about what factory farms were and how horrific they were. From a young age, I always felt like I had a strong connection to animals. And so actually, before my 5th grade class, I did a presentation to them on the horrors of factory farms. And then I started a little campaign, which kind of went through middle school, to get my school to switch from factory farm eggs to cage-free eggs. I did a presentation before the school board, and I was successful in getting them to actually make that switch. I got to meet an alumni from my high school, actually, who worked at the Humane Society, who helped me in that effort. So that was like the first time I really did something on my own. And I do also owe a lot of that to my mom really supporting me on the way and really encouraging me to do it on my own, and of course help, but it really felt like it was something I got to do and make happen all by myself.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Radnor Township. That's where the school was. I also was born in Bucks County and lived in Yardley for a long time, but that happened in Radnor Township on the main line.
So from Radnor, then you went off to university?
Yeah, so after Radnor, I went to Ithaca College, where I majored in politics and environmental studies, and for a little bit was kind of torn between animal activism or environmental activism. And kind of as I went along, I really felt like the environment needed more voices, and I just really always feel a connection to the Delaware River because I was also very fortunate to grow up just a few blocks away from it too. So decided to continue that. And when I finished my time at Ithaca, then I went on to Vermont Law School, and I graduated there in 2022 with my Juris Doctor. And that I just took a bunch of, you don't have like a major, you just kind of take the classes that focus on the law you want. So I focused on environmental law.
And then after that, you came back to Bucks County?
Then I came, I went back to Radnor, but our Delaware Riverkeeper office is in Bucks County, in Bristol. So yeah, I came back, and really there was a spot at Delaware Riverkeeper Network that needed filling, and I just wanted to do it. And I, really felt like that was where I'm meant to be. And I haven't looked back since, and I haven't regretted it ever since.
So tell us about the work that you do as the Advocacy and Advancement Coordinator for Delaware Riverkeeper.
So I do a combination of different things. The advocacy part, I work on different projects. Like the big one that I know I'm sure folks are interested in is data centers. So that involves monitoring projects, researching projects, doing just generic data center research, keeping myself informed, and then tracking the different projects that are happening along the river, and doing some community organizing when that gets involved. I've also been involved in our advocacy on the Atlantic sturgeon, which are critically endangered right now, but we did have a big win raising dissolved oxygen levels through the water quality standards. So that will hopefully be more success down the road. But as folks know, you always have to be watching. And several other projects like that, including the frack ban that we have that some folks are seeking to overturn. And then in my advancement role, I work on trying to build our organizational social presence. So trying to have some, informational videos, cool social media, really just trying to engage the public in a new way with Delaware Riverkeeper Network, because we really are only about 20 people taking care of a watershed that's about the size of the state of Maryland. And I just really think the work we do is so important and so vital. And I just want people to connect with us and know that we're not just people behind a computer screen, but we're actually out there in your communities working on the streams, working on the legal battles. And it's just really even better when we can connect with folks and when we do have these successes and we feel like we get to celebrate with the communities that we're representing.
Let's talk about data centers for a few minutes. There's one slated for Falls Township.
Mhm.
Just last week, West Rock Hill Township tried to get ahead of the curve in case they do run into a data center by passing a zoning ordinance, which I believe, and if you take the supervisors at their word, which I do, because they seemed pretty engaged and did a really good job of trying to listen to and incorporate a lot of the community's concerns. Why should people be in, and we'll just talk about Lower Bucks, like why should people in Falls Township be concerned about this, like, you know, this gigantic data center that's going to be, built and constructed, in their neighborhood?
I think it's really hard. And I think a lot of these projects in general are really scary. I mean, we're talking about massive, massive buildings, especially the Falls Township one is pretty huge. And from my recollection, it was one of the first really big ones that we saw come on the scene in the watershed and in the state of Pennsylvania. And folks should be concerned. And it's really great. Actually, I would say people are turning out in amazing numbers. People are getting active and getting educated in ways that we haven't seen before. And it's important because people's health is on the line. We don't know. Really, I would say one of the issues too we see with these data centers and these developers is there's a lot of broad characterizations made about what the project will look like, what the footprint will be, perhaps how the energy will come. And they're not being upfront and honest with the community. And I've had several data centers that I've just sat in and listened in on, and we constantly hear this project might look different in a couple years. So they're coming to the table and folks are getting committed and making comments and trying to learn about a project that may look very different. And so folks need to be invested in making comments from the get and being involved from the get, because we need to have these industry held accountable, and folks need to know what's coming in, because one project right now could have very different impacts than if they change it. And so folks have to be concerned about their health from the air emissions based on what kind of generators are there. They have to be concerned about how much water is being used by the project. I'm sure a lot of folks have heard about that low hum that comes from data centers and the impact that that can have on not just the enjoyment of your property, but actually disrupting your sleep. I know folks are super concerned about energy bills, which is, of course, something that we have to watch with these projects. And overall, again, these projects, no matter how nice they've tried to sell them, are at this point primarily relying on fossil fuels, which means we are worsening the climate crisis. We are lengthening our dependence on fossil fuels, which worsen the climate crisis. And I think, as everybody knows, as the clock shows up in Harrisburg, we don't have time to stay stuck on fossil fuels. The climate crisis is here, and people are getting hurt today and tomorrow and every single day by it. So the time to switch to good renewable energy projects, to stop having these massive projects that have a terrible footprint on our environment, the time is now. And that's really, I could go on and on about it, but I just do want to say it's people are getting involved, and I love seeing it. And it's great too to see that there are, I think, townships that are really trying to listen to their constituents and really trying to integrate that into zoning ordinances or how they look at a project when it comes before them, and really trying to take in those community concerns if they're considering any sort of approval or denial.
Are lawmakers in Pennsylvania doing enough to kind of take on this problem head on, or this issue head on?
I think it's complicated. I do think there's a lot of folks that I see that are out there really trying to do what they think is helpful and best. And I certainly never want to make the mischaracterization that things are coming out with ill intent sometimes, because we don't always know. And I do think there are legislators really trying their best to support communities. But again, I think part of the issue is we are seeing these projects are coming forward too fast with too new technology, with the ability to present one blueprint and then a couple months later come up with a new blueprint, but not have to restart the process. And so I really do feel like one of the biggest things right now is that communities need to be given the time to consider what's best for them, what's best for these zoning ordinances they'd like to put forward, and just be given the space to learn about what a data center could mean for their community, what it could mean, good or bad. And I just think more time is needed. And I do think that the way things are going right now, I don't think that it is being supportive of communities and what communities need. Because at the same point, the same fact at the end of the day is these data centers are harmful, and communities need that time to come up with a strategy to understand what they are and how to put those zoning ordinances that benefit them, rather than being forced to try to benefit an industry. Because you'll hear time and time again too, well, we're bringing money to your community and you need this money. And perhaps a community does need some extra money, but it doesn't mean that they have to take that pot of money. I was just in Lower Mount Bethel, where folks actually stood up and said, raise our taxes. If we need money so bad, we would rather pay higher taxes than take this data center money. So I think that's really, for me, at the end of the day, is what's coming out of Harrisburg, what's coming from politicians needs to adopt that mindset of communities are speaking out more than ever what they want. And it's time that the laws and the legislation and the concepts and the community programs support that.
Has Delaware Riverkeeper been in contact with any Bucks County lawmakers who are concerned with or working on this issue?
No, we have not been in contact with any Bucks County legislators. I haven't been reached out to by any Bucks County legislators. Again, I think at the end of the day, it's hard sometimes to go to a legislator directly without at least knowing that I have some community information or understanding that that is somebody who really backs the interests of the community. So I generally don't just do that. At least somebody will tell me, oh, I know this person, is up there representing us. So I haven't had that yet.
So you also mentioned that your organization does a lot of, education and advocacy around fracking, which is a huge industry here in Pennsylvania. Why is fracking just a bad idea, and why should the state start pivoting away from it?
I mean, I think, again, coming back to fossil fuels are limited and there's only so much left. And as we understand, those wells are actually not reproducing at the rates that they used to be or the rates that industry wanted to. And I can't pull them out of my head right now, but there's a lot of articles out there that actually show a lot of fracking companies are underwater when it comes to their financing. So they're trying to find these different footholds to stay afloat. I think before it really was just fracking and sending out natural gas. Then it turned into the hydrogen hubs and offering the natural gas to help fuel those through blue hydrogen. Now it's the data centers. We have to have natural gas for data centers. So I think they're always trying to find a new foot peg. But fracking comes again with this myriad of problems that we see. There are issues with earthquakes happening around the country. We do see health impacts of people dying of different diseases they've never had because of the chemicals that are included in the frac runoff and the chemicals they use to slick the drill. You've seen story after story of people in agricultural areas who there was runoff onto their property and their cattle died. We've seen instances in Western Pennsylvania of pockets of children getting a rare form of cancer that's never happened out there before. And so it's just, again, it's not one thing. It's not just emissions, or it's not just turning beautiful green space into a concrete pad. It brings with it this whole host of harms. And I've been unfortunate to go on a frac tour and see some of these communities. And I remember this one we saw. The home was right here, and then right off the road, there was the road that went down to the well pad. And you see these little kids just playing in their pool. I think it was their grandparents' house. And this massive truck is coming by, and it's just so loud. I can't even hear the people right next to me. It drives on the road right next to the kids. And that's not happening once a day. That's happening multiple times a day. I mean, even at a minimum, folks are having their stress levels raised because of this constant noise. And a lot of these people move to these areas for that peace and quiet, for that low stress, but just the constant truck traffic actually has such a negative impact.
Why do you think not just Pennsylvania, but the United States in general is doing such a poor job transitioning to renewable energy?
It's a loaded question, and I think there's a lot. I think there are special money interests that are happening. I do think that right now it is a lot easier for folks in their minds. I don't think in the reality it's easier to stick with fossil fuels, to keep doing that. I do think a lot of it comes back to who is to gain, and there are a lot of lobbying dollars in Washington right now for fossil fuels. And I think too, it's hard. And I think, before we were seeing a lot of programs that came out that supported putting solar on rooftops, for communities to fund a solar project, for getting a small windmill perhaps on your property. And we're not seeing those programs right now. So it's actually making it more inaccessible for folks who would like to put that on their home, be able to do it themselves. And, and I just think there's a lot of misinformation, which is funded by fossil fuels, by those special interests. And it can be very hard for the average person to wade through what's true and what's not. But I always say at the end of the day, I think the programs that we're seeing, that money is just not being funneled to clean energy. Whenever I've heard kind of an argument against clean energy, I just think about the dollars we're spending on things that are not helping everyday people. And if that was spent on the research, such as you'll hear a lot about, what happens to the solar battery when it's recycled. And if there is an issue with that program, imagine how great it would be if there was more funding for making the battery life even longer, or even more efficiently recycling the batteries. I'm not an expert in that, so it might be super great already, but just the concept again of so much money was funneled into making fossil fuels super efficient and super great, but that has not been put towards renewable energy. And I think this concept that it can't even get better for renewable energy is just a misinformation campaign.
Yeah, I think the money interests behind it is a big hurdle. Just big energy, just through lobbying. I mean, Inside Climate News just had published an article about a gas industry front group that's like targeting Democrats in Pennsylvania to convince voters that natural gas is the, quote, most affordable and reliable energy source. So I think that's a lot to overcome. And there's just, unfortunately, those that are lobbying for sustainable, future, let alone sustainable energy, just don't have the money to compete. And as a result, unfortunately, the influence that they have is lacking.
Mm-hmm.
What other issues are front and center right now with what you guys are working on?
There's a lot. And it's hard too, because like I said, we have a staff of 20 working on a watershed throughout. So I'm kind of in one arena. We have different staff that are working on stream restoration, on buffers. We have other staff that are really more in that deep science level. I will I think I'll pivot to Atlantic sturgeon, one, because it's one that I love, but it's also, I think, a really great success story. And I do think in this world today, like, people need to know that we're winning when it comes to the environment. It's really hard and there's a lot of hard things going on, but there are wins happening every day, even if you don't hear about it. But I think certainly the Atlantic sturgeon comes forefront to mind because we had this big win last year where we got the water quality standards upgraded for them, which means that their dissolved oxygen levels should be going up in the river, which hopefully means we'll start to see more spawning more sturgeon long living because they'll have more oxygen to breathe. But we actually had kind of a scare that shows there are other threats still happening where we were alerted that there was a possibility that there was going to be dredging done in the Marcus Hook region of the Delaware River, which is crucial spawning grounds and young of year kind of living grounds for the sturgeon. And it was actually proposed during the time of year restriction, which for folks who don't know, it's kind of this set period of time where those activities can't happen, such as dredging, because it interferes with the spawning area for the safety of the young sturgeon who live there. And then the concept, of course, being when the time of year restriction has ended, they've kind of migrated out and they're off adults doing things. But this was proposed during that time of year. And so we immediately jumped to getting folks to send in letters, to sending in comments to the Army Corps of Engineers, to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And we did get confirmation that that project will not be happening as of right now. But it just goes to show that really any day something can change. So I would say that's a big one. We also have
Anneke, real quick, can you just explain to listeners, what the Atlantic sturgeon is?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it's my favorite. The Atlantic sturgeon, we call them the dino in the Delaware. And I am still always shocked whenever we do a tabling event that most folks don't know that they live in the Delaware River. So it's this giant, massive fish that you've seen that can go up to about 20 feet. I think some get even larger of like different species of sturgeon. And so the ones that we have that live in the Delaware River are actually a genetically unique population that exists nowhere else in the world. It's a specific haplotype. And so they're kind of bottom feeders more. They're down at the lower end. They have these massive, cool scoots. I definitely would tell anybody to go look at it because it's a really fantastic fish. We do hear about them kind of just like jumping straight out of the water. Some folks see that. But there were hundreds of thousands of these fish way back. And then Philadelphia became known as caviar capital of North America. So for folks who don't know, caviar is sturgeon eggs. It's sometimes called roe, I think is the other word. And so they were harvested at massive numbers. And there's photos of them laid on the banks of the river, almost like timber, just like stacked really high. So that was the first decimation of the Atlantic sturgeon. And then since, it's been poor water quality standards, which have come from wastewater treatment plants not upgrading property, pollution in the river from different projects. Also, when the river is deepened and dredged, that does have an impact on the sturgeon. And so we have worked really hard to get that in different ways. We've fought the deepening of the Delaware River. That did get deepened to 45 feet, but we're trying to prevent it from ever happening again. We've gotten these water quality standards upgraded. But it's just such a beautiful creature that I feel like so honored. And we call them dino in the Delaware because they have been around since the time of the dinosaurs. And you might not always see them in the river, but some people do. And so I always tell folks like walking along the riverway in Philly, like there might be one. I have yet to see one live, but.
Do you guys have any events coming up? Or is the office the type of space where someone can just like pop in and see what you guys are up to, and just, maybe if they even wanted to like volunteer, if there's opportunities for that as well?
Yeah, so our office is not pop-in visiting space necessarily. Of course, we're more than happy for folks to give us a phone call. We do, if folks have something they'd like to talk about, we can always kind of schedule a call or a Zoom or something like that. But we're very fortunate to have lots of volunteer opportunities. One, I will say we table lots of different events. So you'll see us sometimes down at the waterfront. There's like a river fest between Camden and Philadelphia, and we'll be down there a lot. We have different speaking events, or usually if there's a big kind of river or nature event, we'll have a table. Sometimes we get to do concerts, which is really fun. We'll be tabling at those. But we have lots of different events. So I always encourage folks to go to www.delawareriverkeeper.org. And we have a calendar of things. If you're not a member yet, it's a great idea because we send out newsletters and events. We have a learn to fish opportunity, which I believe is open to youth and adults. So anybody could learn if you don't know how to fish. We have different kind of kayaking or in the water activities. Last year we had a pedostomum survey, which is looking for this really ancient plant. So folks got to come out with our scientist teams and kind of snorkel around and look for this ancient plant and help us study it in the river. And of course, for folks who are also interested, we have our peaceful protest or our action items like that folks can come to. We did the funeral for the Atlantic sturgeon a couple years ago, and folks came and dressed up and did this procession around City Hall with us for the Atlantic sturgeon. And of course, I always tell folks, check our website constantly for our Act Now page. And if you're a member, you'll already get it. But we really try to offer opportunities for everybody to take action. So you can sign a petition, you can write a comment, you can make a phone call. So whether you want to be out in nature enjoying the river, or you want to be taking action on your computer or through your phone, we really offer an opportunity for everybody, because being an activist and making a difference in the world kind of looks different for everybody. And I always say every part of it comes together to make this like beautiful puzzle we have for protecting our environment. And you can't do one without the other.
And so people can sign up for a newsletter to stay up to date with everything that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so if you're a member of Delaware Riverkeeper Network, which membership is free because we don't believe that anybody should have to pay to have their voice heard in protecting their environment, you do get different emails, you'll get newsletters, you'll get action alerts. I think on our Act Now page, you can actually sign up for our e-activist alerts. And that's really the best way to stay involved. And I've actually read some articles recently that a lot of folks, the primary way they're actually finding out what's going on in their communities isn't even so much through the news, but actually is through different nonprofits. And that's kind of how folks are finding out more what's happening right in their community or right in their state, because the nonprofits are really out on the ground kind of sharing that information, sharing ways to get involved. So I actually found that really great that folks are maybe relying on us even more. But also, of course, the news is always a great resource and folks should always stay informed.
Don't count us out, people. Okay. And people can go to DelawareRiverkeeper.org to become a member and to be engaged. And finally, Anneke, you had mentioned earlier that like when you were growing up, like every day was kind of like Earth Day for you. So what advice would you have for folks so that they can make every day of their lives an Earth Day?
I think the biggest thing is I do think a lot of folks feel a lot of pressure to be perfect, and that if you can't do it all or you can't do this specific thing, that you're not doing it right. And I just think that's not true. I think, again, everybody has to have their own way to do it, and everybody's resources and time and capabilities are really different. So I think taking some time and finding out what's important to you and how you can give back to the earth. And I think just really knowing what that means for you. For some folks, it's just buying a reusable water bottle and mug. And every time you go to a coffee shop, I tell folks, even if they look at you a little weird, say, please, no throwaway cup, put it in my mug, and they'll do it. For some folks, it's finding a refillery store and going to there. For others, it's buying ingredients not from a big box grocery store, but from their local farmer and supporting that and making good, healthy meals at home. And for some folks, it really is. It's joining a nonprofit or going to volunteer activities or taking a walk in the woods, signing a petition. So I just think everybody can make Earth Day every day by making a good choice. And that looks different for everybody. And I certainly don't think that anybody should be shamed for one way or the other. And I think, again, it's all part of this puzzle that's really great. And I love seeing how creative people get when it comes to protecting their earth.
Well, Annika, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today. And just thanks for all the work that you do with the Delaware Riverkeeper. I really appreciate it. And hopefully you can find some time to come back on again soon.
Absolutely, I would love that.
This has been The Signal, a podcast by the Bucks County Beacon. I'm Cyril Mikaleko, editor-in-chief and host. For more progressive news, analysis, and opinion from Bucks County and beyond, go to www.buckscountybeacon.com.